Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Monday, December 8th, and BYU's season has come to a close. They have one more game. It's just not in the college football playoff.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
No surprise, the college football playoff committee snubs BYU. That's right. BYU left out of the 12-team college football playoff. 22 wins over the last 2 years. 22. An average of 11 wins per season in the 12-team playoff era. Not good enough for this committee, as BYU once again is on the outside looking in. What's even more disappointing is that BYU goes into championship game week. They fall to Texas Tech 34-7, but they were number 11 entering the week against that Texas Tech team that's outstanding, number 4 in the country, an elite team, Big 12 champions now. BYU loses that game 34-7, and that blowout loss causes BYU to drop from 11 to 12 in the playoff rankings. So the Cougars ended up being the second team outside of the playoff. Meanwhile, Alabama, who suffered a blowout loss to Georgia in the SEC championship, well, that moved them from 9 to 9 and had no impact on the Crimson Tide. College Football Playoff Committee Chairman Hunter Yurachek was asked why BYU dropped and Alabama didn't. This was his explanation.
The biggest difference in those two situations, Zach, was the fact that Alabama had already beaten Georgia at Georgia earlier in the year. BYU had that same opportunity at Texas Tech early in the year, and BYU did not perform and look great in either one of those games versus Texas Tech, the one that was played about 4 weeks ago, and then, of course, yesterday's game. So that was the biggest difference, is Alabama had that big win at Georgia, which is arguably the best win of any team this season.
What we can learn from all of this, if you haven't already, the College Football Playoff Committee can always move the goalpost and support any of their rankings. They always can. The College Football Playoff Committee takes a lot of heat. They take a lot of heat. Sometimes they're a straw man. More times than not, they get this thing right. They really do. When you look back on it and say, who really didn't belong? But this playoff, it just doesn't seem right to me this year. It seems completely off. And I'm not talking about James Madison and Tulane being in. I am a big supporter of Group of 5 teams, Group of 6 next year, having access to the college football playoff. So I'm totally fine with them being ranked higher than ACC champs. Totally fine. That is okay. But for an 11-2 BYU team that only loses to the 4th-ranked team in the country, that's your only losses. And look, they were blowouts. Still, though, even if they had lost by 7 or 3, I'm not confident that BYU gets in to the playoff. And why is that? Well, BYU, like those Tulanes and James Madisons, they're basically viewed like a Group of 5. The Big 12 is being treated like a Group of 5 league. Texas Tech is being undervalued at number 4. Yes, they have a first-round bye, and that's fantastic. But no one's acknowledging that their one loss was with a backup quarterback. Imagine the excuses that would be played by an SEC commissioner or a Big Ten commissioner if an Ohio State or an Indiana or a Georgia, and they only had one loss, and that was without a starting QB. They would be in the conversation still for a number 1, 2, or 3 seed. Texas Tech just slides in at 4. It's fine. They'll be able to prove it on the field and go win the thing potentially. But the Big 12 is completely undersold. When BYU got the invite to the Big 12 in 2021, September 10th, 2021, a lot of the excitement, one was because enhanced competition, security, too. Those are the biggest things, to get out of the lonely road of football independence, which, when you look back on it now, was completely awful. We polished that thing and made it as good as possible, I think, for media and fans following that thing. That was brutal. Now experiencing a little bit of conference life in a power league, it's much better. But what was also thought when BYU joined the Big 12 was there would be a little bit of respect given to BYU because of those Roman numerals on the jersey and that Big 12 logo. That's still a young power league compared to its peers, but still has produced high-level football. They would get more respect. Not the case at all. Not the case at all. 2 years, 11 win seasons. It don't matter. It does not matter to the College Football Playoff Committee how well BYU performs. And for that, it's very discouraging. And it almost says that BYU has to be perfect in order to go to the College Football Playoff in a 12-team field. It blows me away. When you look at some of the resume and then you see the clips from Scott Van Pelt and Stanford Steve and say, oh, the conversation was Notre Dame, Miami, but maybe it should have been Notre Dame and BYU or Miami and BYU. Oh, thanks for saying that the Monday after the rankings come out. It's disappointing. BYU is a really good football team, and yes, they had 2 bad days against one of the nation's best teams, and I think a team that could be the best, and they're getting undervalued. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, I asked him straight up, said, what playoff format are you continuing to support? There was a lot of push for the 5+11 at the spring meetings. Now with only one bid to the Big 12, and at the time, this was before kickoff, the projection of only one team in the Big 12, I asked him if he was leaning more to supporting a 24-team format with automatic qualifiers. This was Yormark.
I've always been a believer that the 5-11 provide the right access. I believe that on a percentage basis, when there's 136 FBS schools, the number 12 is too low. We need more access for all the right reasons. And I'm very consistent about that. I have spent recently some time with my Power 4 Commissioner colleagues to talk about different formats. And that conversation will continue, and we'll see where it takes us. But as of today, I like 5-11.
5-11's not the move, because this would still be the same situation for these Big 12 teams. Go back to 2022 when it was a 4-team playoff. TCU got in. Going into that Big 12 championship game, 3-loss Kansas State was a top 10 team. A 3-loss Big 12 team was a top 10 team going into the Big 12 championship. Fast forward 3 years later, the playoff expands. You would think in that moment back in 2022, oh, Big 12 is comfortably going to get 2 teams into the field on an annual basis because now it's 12 teams. That was with a 3-loss team being in the top 10. Now you can't get a 1-loss team into the top 10 outside of the favorite. That was Texas Tech, who was darn near perfect and hammering everyone. If Texas Tech wasn't dominating opponents the way that they have this year, I don't know if they're confidently number 4. And what I'm getting at is if you go to that 5+11, who's to say they don't say, you know what, 9-3 Texas, they're better than BYU. Look, they thought Miami, who didn't play this past weekend and play a 13th data point, was better. They thought Notre Dame was better, didn't play a 13th data point, didn't beat anyone of significance. It's crazy. Who's to say that if you go to 5+11 and give more power to the committee, that they just don't move the goalpost again? It's concerning. You've got to go to the automatic qualifiers, but this was Yormark on when a new format could come to be.
I can't speak for the other commissioners because obviously it's a collaborative effort on the CFP format and where it goes. I can tell you we're working on it, but we can't rush it. We need to see the data. We have to better understand the unintended consequences of that, the calendar, what it means for our student athletes to have additional games, their health and wellness. A lot goes into it. It's not just about picking a number. You also have to look through a filter and says, what are the unintended consequences of those decisions, which is what the commissioners and myself are working on. I'm not overly optimistic we're going to be able to change anything for next year. Obviously, the deadline with ESPN was moved, and that is a milestone marker, if you will. But we're in the lab. We're trying to figure it out, and we're working very closely and partnering with the practitioners, which are the heads of football of the 4 conferences, and they're leaning in too. And as I said, we'll be meeting again in the near future, and we'll see where it takes us.
The Big 12 has got to hope that the Big Ten's reported views of a 24-team playoff with 4 automatic qualifiers to all the power leagues is the format that goes through eventually. That is the only path to getting multiple bids consistently for the Big 12 every year. That is the only way to get it done. Only way. And your mark and the ACC, the Big 12, they don't have the power. It's up to the SEC and Big 10 to come to an agreement. But the issue, too, it's Fox versus ESPN. It's a whole lot of issues, man. I hope we see a point where the playoff increases to 24, automatic qualifiers, and also the TV distribution is with a bunch of networks. ESPN, Fox, NBC, CBS, like the NFL. Because having it just be solely ESPN, and then you see 5 SEC teams, you can't help but wonder. It's very frustrating, and teams like BYU, because they don't have the chosen brand, get left out, and they have to go to just the bowl season and not have a chance to go win a national title, which really this BYU team deserves. Let's take a break. We'll get to more BYU football thoughts as the Cougars are headed to the postseason. We'll discuss that around the corner here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper with you. BYU falls to Texas Tech 34-7 in the Big 12 championship game. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, both video and audio. Subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review. It helps out the show a ton as we're talking BYU sports every day on the Cougar Tracks podcast feed and on KSL NewsRadio. So covering the Big 12 championship game, first off, was a lot of fun. That was a bucket list item in my professional career. To go to a power conference championship game was really cool. And BYU, Texas Tech, that scene at AT&T Stadium, going to a game at AT&T Stadium makes that venue shine. I've gone to Big 12 Football Media Day at AT&T Stadium, and it was great. It's a huge venue. It's awesome. But I think the magic, or just kind of the huge stage that stadium provides, gets highlighted on an actual game. And then to add it being a sold-out crowd, it was awesome. I must say, too, I knew that Texas Tech fans would have the higher number. This notion that BYU was going to have more fans than Tech was always silly to me. But I'm not going to lie, I was a bit surprised at how overwhelming Texas Tech was on the crowd compared to BYU. It was like 70-30. It might have been 75-25. BYU had a nice showing, much better than Arizona State or Iowa State had last year. But it wasn't even close to Texas Tech. And BYU's fans were heard early on, but there wasn't much to cheer about in this game. But covering the game was a lot of fun, just being there at the stadium and seeing all the pregame theatrics, and the press box was awesome. AT&T Stadium, NFL media, man, you get taken care of. All the amenities that you get in a press box in an NFL venue like that, wow, it's incredible. I was envious to think of covering games in that every single week. Would just be remarkable to have those sort of accommodations. I still like LaVell Edwards Stadium personally. Among my college stadium travels, I think BYU's stadium is probably one of the most practical and ease of use really at any of the stadiums, but AT&T Stadium was truly remarkable. It was quite the sight, and it really honored to having covered a game in that stadium, and for it to be a BYU conference championship game in a Power 4 league, truly awesome. I just wish BYU would have put up a better fight. And that first drive, though, they showed a lot of fight. It felt like they don't know, but they about to find out type moment. And then Texas Tech's like, well, that's cute, but you're about to really find out. What you experienced in November is about to happen again. And that's what it was, as Texas Tech rolled comfortably. And I really look at this game. I think BYU loses. I predicted Texas Tech to win the game. I would have been stunned, honestly, at BYU won. I thought they'd put up a better fight, but Texas Tech's legit, man. They are an outstanding team, and they're being undervalued. But I think what hurt and killed any chance of a potential upset for BYU was when Bear Bachmeier suffered an injury in the first drive. Lee Hunter wraps him up, and Roberts finishes him up high. It was the play right before the touchdown run from LJ Martin, and I saw up in the press box, Bear was visibly limping. Like, it was clear as day he was banged up. And you just knew right there something's wrong. And then the rest of the game, they're basically never taking shots downfield. And there were moments where they're trying to go 10, 12 yards down the field, and Bear's throwing basic off his back foot and trying to give everything he's got to get that ball downfield. It changed everything. BYU was looking to air it out a little more in this game, take a lot more shots downfield. They just weren't able to because he was banged up. And that raises the question, when you see him so banged up and visibly limping like that, why not change the quarterback at all? And I'm not suggesting Bear Bachmeier needed to be benched, because that's not what it was. He was just visibly hurt. He was limping completely. And see what else someone's got to maybe completely catch Texas Tech off guard and take some shots downfield. BYU could not throw the ball at all downfield. The one time that they did in the second half, it resulted in a pass interference, but still it was like Texas Tech's defense is legit. They're elite, but there was just no fear. No fear for Texas Tech because they knew BYU was just dinking and dunking the whole time, and Texas Tech's just teeing off, man. It was really tough. But that first drive, that thing was a thing of beauty. It was fantastic. But then the turnovers came to be. And look, BYU ends up -4 in turnovers. And you can honestly say they were probably -5 because of the fake punt. And I know it didn't cost any points, but I thought that was a foolish decision. That fake punt just seemed silly. That was not the move. First half, BYU had some missed interception opportunities. Falatau, Logan Latui. You got to come up with them. BYU had a lead. If you get one of those, you get a chance to go score, even with a hobbled Bear Bachmeier. Put Texas Tech in a 2-possession deficit. That's a different game. Baron Morton started slow early. He was a little shaky at first, but then he settled in and he had a really nice game. I thought he played well. 20 of 33, 215 yards, 2 TDs, and 0 interceptions. Bear, 16 of 27, 115, 2 picks, 59% completion rate. And then the runs, 9 carries, -2 yards. Couldn't run. And when Bear, in his ability to run the football, is taken away, it makes it hard for him. And then he's banged up, he's hobbled. Just a difficult day at the office for BYU. LJ Martin, I thought, gave it a valiant effort. 19 carries for 76 yards against this defense. That was a strong showing, I thought, from LJ. Because, again, Texas Tech going into the game was only allowing 68 yards per game. BYU finishes below that average, 63, but LJ gave it a go, man. He was around that ballpark that I said, 90 to 100 yards was kind of the target. He was 14 yards off that 90-yard mark. He did everything he could, but it was a one-dimensional team. It just was. And BYU was no threat in the second half at all. And all the turnovers started to pile up. Roberts was fantastic. The interceptions that he made, it was just a tough day for BYU. And what I come away from that game feeling like, Texas Tech's elite. BYU, there is a big gap between 1 and 2 in the Big 12. All the stuff I said about the playoffs still applies, though. I think BYU should have got a shot. I think Texas Tech is much better than 90% of that field in the playoff. Texas Tech is fantastic. They're an elite team. And their running backs are good, too, with Williams and Dickey. But I think, again, a lesson that was valuably learned for BYU is you got to step it up with money. More money. And it's not just throwing money at any random transfer. The underrated aspect to Texas Tech was that they had a clear strategy. The way that they build their rosters. There's something to learn there. Now, BYU is going to do it differently than most. And culture is a big piece for BYU, but I think culture is a big thing for Texas Tech, too. There's a little bit of a blueprint you can follow, but do it in the BYU way. And with the enhanced resources that are coming from Kalani Sitake's extension. It's time to step it up even higher level. But it was a tough day for BYU. There's no doubt about that. But still, professionally speaking, I had a great time covering the Big 12 championship game. It was also fun to talk with Brett Yormark in the press conference. There was some really good stuff there before the game. And there was another tidbit that I wanted to cover here on the show today. Yormark was asked by a reporter about if the league was exploring any policy to avoid these institutions from having anti-Latter-day Saint chants at BYU games. And this was Brett Yormark when asked about that.
We have zero tolerance for it. And it starts with me, both on a personal and professional level. Zero tolerance. And the folks at BYU are very much aware of that. I spent a lot of time with Shane and Brian. BYU has been a fantastic addition to this conference, and they have created enormous value for the Big 12. And there is zero tolerance for any chance like that. I want to make that crystal clear. And we do have a sportsmanship policy, and our schools must abide by it. Having said all that, we are going to come together as 16 institutions following this football season and figure out how we can get better. It's about changing behavior, and we will do that. But thank you for your question.
Interesting commentary there from Commissioner Yormark. I thought it was a good question because, let's face it, Cougar fans are tired of going to these venues and experiencing that. Now, that wasn't the case in Arlington. Texas Tech fans, from the sounds of it, again, I'm in the press box, and it's a little bit soundproof, so it's hard to really gauge any sort of chance in pockets of the stadium, in a massive stadium like that. But by all accounts, according to social media posts from fans and interactions they had, it sounds like it was a pretty friendly environment. And in Lubbock, too, Texas Tech, their basketball coach, before the game, Grant McCasland was like, hey, there's some chants out there about BYU. Don't do that. Please make it about us. Don't make it about these chants. I think it's been good that, the state of Texas, you're not seeing that. Cincinnati had it. Some of the old Pac-12 schools have had it a lot. I hope to see that we don't experience any of these sort of chants going forward in the future from a coverage and just for the BYU team. They don't have to experience this again where they're hearing those type of chants. And I'm really curious to see what sort of policies are implemented beyond the sportsmanship and maybe set dollar amount fines that if this occurs, you will be fined this going forward. Texas Tech fans were booing the heck out of Yormark at the trophy presentation over banning tortillas and implementing a hefty fine to that and a penalty on the field if it happened. So Texas Tech fans are ticked at Yormark for taking away a storied tradition at Texas Tech with the tortillas. What could be the fine going forward for a potential anti-religious chant in the future towards BYU? I'll be curious to see what emerges from that after this football season, and potentially we'll find out more at the spring meetings coming up when all the coaches meet. And there's always meetings with these coaches and ADs, but when the coaches come together, that could be interesting as well. Let's take our final break. On the other side, you'll get my final thoughts here from BYU Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship and look ahead to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, the People's National Champion, here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper with you. No college football playoff for BYU, but that doesn't mean they're not playing for the People's National Championship. That's right, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which calls itself the People's National Championship. Last year was the People's Big 12 Championship, BYU, Colorado. Now BYU leveled up. They're going to the People's National Championship. It's BYU, number 22, Georgia Tech. Excited for this one. I'm curious to see how BYU responds. This could be a letdown spot, folks. Let's call it what it is. It would have been awesome, though, to see BYU and Notre Dame. Notre Dame backing out is so weak and so soft from the Irish. And I know their AD has been making the media rounds to try to justify this move. Look, you got left out of the playoff. And I honestly think, Notre Dame has an axe to grind a little bit, because I do think they're a team that could have made a deep run in the playoff. I honestly do. But you had a weak schedule and you didn't beat anyone of significance. BYU's got better wins on its resume with Utah and Arizona than the Irish do. So what do you have to cry about? And then to take away a bowl opportunity because you got left out of the playoff? Give me a break. Show up and go play a game. I don't understand that mindset of just giving up on bowl games. It's not uncommon, for the record. I mean, if you've been watching college football, there have been teams that have opted out of many games in the past with coaching transitions. There was even COVID just 5 years ago where we were seeing bowl games unplugged hours before kickoff. It's not completely uncommon that this sort of thing happens. It's just now everyone's saying, oh no, the sport is broken. Notre Dame unplugged from a bowl game. What are we going to do with the sport? Everything's going to be fine. College football is still going to move forward. It's still a messed up system how you determine a national champion, but the sport will be fine, and you will still have 2-3 million people tuning into random bowl games that have nothing on the line, but we love football, so we're watching the games. Nothing's going to be ending in these doomsday things. That happens every Selection Sunday, where these just doomsday comments come to light from people, anonymous people saying, oh no, this is the end of the sport as we know it. No, it's not. Notre Dame can be mad all they want with the ACC. I'm glad the ACC fought back and said, you know what? We're protecting Miami and our 17 football member institutions. Tough luck, Notre Dame. Join the league if you want to be protected by the ACC. I don't understand Notre Dame. If I'm BYU, don't ever try to schedule them. Don't ever bother with Notre Dame ever again. After all the stunts that they pulled with the 6-game series with independent BYU, don't try to schedule them ever again. And look, Notre Dame don't want to play you anyway, so it's a moot point. But don't even bother. Everyone tries to just give in to Notre Dame. And then starting next year, they get an automatic bid if they're in the top 12 of the rankings. Are we supposed to be okay with that? An independent team that could just basically dumb down its schedule, win everything, and they're guaranteed a bid? Insane to me. They get all the benefits of the doubt. Kalani Sitake, he's gearing up his team for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. This was his reaction to moving down in the college football playoff rankings.
I said a lot yesterday, when we're talking about when the playoff committee had to make the decision. And I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not easy it can't be easy being in a playoff committee. And once they made a decision, it's set. And so I choose to be positive about everything. I think it's a hard thing for them to do. I think they did the best they could. We have an opportunity to play a game, and the goal is for us to play as many as we can. And we have one more now, and it happens to be against an amazing program like Georgia Tech. And we're looking forward to the matchup. I can't really say anything other than they did their best, and I'm looking forward to watching how the playoff plays out. I think there's some great teams in there. It's the unfortunate part is that there's a bunch of teams that could play in it, and that's what made it really difficult. And so whether they expanded or not, I have no idea. But the fact is that we get to play in this bowl game against Georgia Tech makes me really excited.
Kalani will be ready to roll for this game. I have some questions, though, on this one, if BYU players are going to get motivated, because that was a sad team coming out of Arlington, and rightfully so. It felt like the season ended a bit in Arlington on Saturday. This is going to be one of those tough spots to pick yourself up off the mat and get motivated again. Last year, it was easy. They were chomping at the bit to prove something. And I think a Notre Dame matchup could have really inspired this BYU team. Georgia Tech, I don't think it's as inspiring. However, Georgia Tech, like BYU, in many stretches until they went through their little bit of a losing stretch, they were getting disrespected by pollsters and the committee as well. They lost one game, and they tumbled down the rankings. It's a really good football team with a really good quarterback, and if you're not motivated, you can absolutely take an L in this game. So BYU's got to be motivated in this one. It'll take place Saturday, December 27th. Kickoff at 1:30. We'll have extended pregame for that one on that day of BYU and Georgia Tech. But when it comes to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, the People's National Champion, the most pressing question for this game, what's Kalani's favorite Pop-Tart?
I haven't met a Pop-Tart flavor I didn't like. But I will say this. I'm pretty easy. Strawberry is always the one to go to because I think that's the one everybody tried first. I like the strawberry. I do like wildberry. I'm not against brown sugar and cinnamon. Let me see, what else can I name? Cherry's good too. The cookies and cream's a good one too. So I don't know. I love them all. But if someone's being judgmental around me, then I'm probably going to go with the one that's not frosted just to shut them up a little bit.
Classic Kalani. Add that to, what was it, in 2022? It was the New Mexico Bowl, everything green chili. When it comes to bowl games, Kalani is always quick to point out the food. Shreveport in 2021, it was the gumbo, the jambalaya. 2019, Hawaii. 2016, I can't remember what he said for San Diego. 2018, French fries, potato bowl. Boca Raton. Gosh, I can't remember what he was talking about in food on for 2020. I'd have to go back through my list. And San Antonio, there was commentary too. Bowl prep and food consumption. Kalani always brings that up for the bowl season. Cannot wait for it, though. It's another opportunity for this BYU team to get better, and it's a chance to get a 12th win, which would be the first time that's happened for a single BYU team since 2001. So a little bit of an opportunity to really make a statement for this 2025 BYU football team. That's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. We will be back tomorrow with more BYU football and BYU basketball talk on a game day tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks.